Among 7 billion people, only a few were chosen to be summoned into a new world, the chosen ones. It was supposed to be a flawless selection, but for one boy named Reunited, destiny took a twisted turn. During the grand summoning, a critical error was ignored by the summoners, and Reunited was swallowed by the dark void, falling into a pit that led to an unforgiving hell. Surrounded by endless waves of beasts and monsters, he fought alone with nothing but a sword and the will to survive. Time stood still. His body never aged, his wounds always healed, and death was never granted. For 10 agonizing years, Reunited faced horrors beyond imagination, while a mysterious window appeared day after day, asking the same chilling question: do you want to end your life? But he endured. Now, the summoner who once cast him aside has realized the truth, and driven by fear, drags Reunited into the new world once again, believing he's still weak and eventually get killed. No one will know about that error. But what they don't know is that Reunited is no longer the boy they abandoned. He is something else, something forged in 10 years of hell. So at the start of the story, we saw Reunited face a terrifying beast, a level 4 hell dog with dark, feral eyes and a jaw full of razor-sharp teeth. The monster charged at him with terrifying force and sent him flying into a massive boulder. As the dust settled, Reunited stood calmly, making a small hand gesture. The hell dog paused, confused, only to realize too late that Reunited's blade had already pierced its chest. Without hesitation, Reunited yanked the sword free and slashed upward, cleaving the monster in half. He told us that there's nothing left in this world, just him and never-ending monsters. A moment later, the system announced Reunited had reached the experience requirement for level up, but he was frustrated too, and acting like he had done this thing many times before but couldn't get his goal. Hope filled his eyes. But just as quickly that hope vanished, a strange glitch occurred. His level reset back to 1. Despair crashed over him. Dropping to his knees, Reunited gripped his head and screamed into the silence, asking why he was trapped in this nightmare. The system coldly reminded him only by reaching level 5 could he leave this place. Yet no matter how hard he fought, how many enemies he defeated, the result was always the same: a reset. He kept killing monsters. Year by year, 3-year passed, 5-year passed, even 10-year passed, but nothing changed. His 10-year-long struggle felt endless and pointless, his mind shattered, his soul battered. Every battle, every death he avoided only led to more of the same, but Reunited kept fighting without counting days and became stronger. Scene changed to city, where a lady was killing a man brutally. She seemed to be psycho killer. His partner warned her that if someone found Uti, that then they could be face some trouble. From their conversation, we can conclude that they were assassins and was finding someone. Before leaving, she burned the dead body. Then protagonists described that when this merciless loop began, he was first transported to this mysterious world, Rathna, and he is chosen one whose goal is to survive and become stronger. At the start, he was just a frightened young man being attacked by what looked like a wild wolf. The system informed him it was actually a level 1 hell dog, the weakest kind of monster. He barely fought back using a rock, the only weapon he had, but the monster was again ready to attack him. A screen popped up, revealing that it had the strength of an average adult male and he could level up by defeating monsters. This world functioned like a game. But unlike a game, this was brutally real. He wasn't here by choice. Flashbacks revealed his life before Rathna. He had just finished his mandatory military service and was spending his days lounging at home, snacking and gaming. Suddenly, a strange smoke filled the room and he vanished. He woke up and heard strange voices discussing 7 billion candidates and the chosen one. One voice mentioned an error, a guideline sent incorrectly, but another dismissed it, saying only one person was affected, so that's not big deal. Moments later, Reunited felt a violent pain and was dropped into Rathna. In the beginning, Reunited defeated the Helldog and earned 13 experience points, but he was still confused, still in disbelief. He questioned everything. He was in shock and could not digest that he is in the life-death situation, and all of a sudden, he hadn't even dated a girl yet. The system appeared and offered him a choice: give up and die, or continue. It told him his survival chance was only 5%. Reunited rejected the option to end his life and chose to fight. That choice increased his stats and rewarded his determination. The system allowed him to choose a class. He chose Magician class because of its long-range capabilities, but he kept getting rejected. Magician, no talent. Magic Swordsman, denied. Healer, denied. In the end, he was forcibly assigned the Warrior class. That was not even a choice. He wiped his tears and tried to choose a spear for its long range, but the system gave him a longsword instead, claiming another error. With no other option, he accepted the weapon and began to train, because having a longsword was at least better than a rock. As time passed, Ryuhan started understanding the system and how monsters adapted. Now only he is leveling up, but monsters can also level up. The Helldogs learned his attack patterns and began exploiting the gaps in his moves. To counter that, Ryuhan adapted too, developing new attack strategies, like striking from above. Helldog dodged it and leaped towards him, but he somehow killed it. Finally, his efforts paid off. He reached level 2 and unlocked a new skill called Stab. Slowly, he learned how to cook Helldog meat and survive off it. The system helped analyze materials and food sources. The claws and teeth of the beasts were useless, but the meat was edible and essential. One day, he wondered what had happened to the other 7 billion candidates. This triggered a response from the system revealing critical information, that he had to reach level 5 and leave Rock Mountain, the beginner zone, then meet other chosen ones. He could level up to 20 and he would be able to travel to the Rathna continent, where other warriors went. He tried asking more questions, but the system glitched again. With a new goal in mind, Ryuhan pushed forward, killing stronger Helldogs. The system scaled the monsters to match his level, so even as he grew, the fights remained brutal. He went for brutal hunt. He kept killing Helldogs, leveling up and learned new skills like side slash. His whole life was like a NPC he fought. Kill, got injured, ate, slept. After 27 days of hunting, blood, and pain, Ryuhan finally reached level 5. His body had grown stronger, his stats increased, and he had unlocked 3 new skills. Finally, he had done it. He could leave. He tried to fight more, thinking it would correct itself. Instead, his level dropped all the way to 1. It was like a cruel joke. His skills and stats stayed, but he had to climb from level 1 all over again. He thought, now that will be easy at second time, and monsters keep getting stronger despite his level. No matter how many times he reached level 5, the system reset him, over and over. 7 years passed, in a hellish loop of leveling up from 1 to 4. Chosen ones didn't age, his wounds healed fast every single day, but he remained stuck. His level always returned to 1, although his stats remained same, but he couldn't learn a new skill since he couldn't level up to 5. The only skill he had were stab, side slash, and vertical slash. The Helldogs evolved. They became stronger, more terrifying. Their appearances changed. No longer beasts, but monstrous, half-rotten creatures that mirrored Ryuhan's descent into madness. He had no choice but to continue. The world didn't let him die, but it didn't let him live either. He himself became a monster-like being inside. Elsewhere, a white figure monitored the simulation. This was the 5th iteration of the game system called Jaren Rathna. Most chosen ones cleared the world in a year, but while reviewing logs, the figure noticed a disposed world, Felarathna, and saw one remaining active player, Ryuhan. He had somehow survived for over a decade in a zone no one else remained in. Shocked and confused, the figure didn't understand how or why the system still functioned there. Ryuhan somehow found himself back in his room. Suddenly, the familiar guideline screen popped up once again, asking him if he would like to take his own life. The sudden appearance of the screen shook him up, snapping him out of unconsciousness in the Felarathna. It had been 10 long years, and yet, Ryuhan had survived another day. Even a fall from a cliff was no longer enough to kill him, but that wasn't the issue now. He had returned to level 1 once again. He wondered if he could even call this existence living anymore, and for a brief moment the thought of quitting crossed his mind. But the thought was short-lived. If he were to die, he wanted it to be a death worth something. With that resolve, he picked up his blade and began to hunt again. Having spent more than a decade in this place, Ryuhan had completely lost track of time. Over the years, he had adopted a few hobbies, ones that surprisingly proved useful for survival. Even in such a harsh and unforgiving environment, he had learned to live with a positive attitude. He had even managed to build a home for himself. Though Ryuhan claimed to live without anger now, it quickly became apparent that some things still managed to enrage him, like the house he had spent 3 years building being destroyed by a Helldog. Still, he remained as calm as possible, quietly thinking about building a new home, this time using the Helldog's bones. The Helldog, sensing Ryuhan's bloodlust, immediately fled and unleashed its dragon breath. It was a terrifying attack that would make anyone question whether it was even a dog at this point. Regardless, Ryuhan was no stranger to its patterns and attacks. He knew this one was impossible to dodge, so he braced himself and blocked it with his own body. He emerged unscathed, though the edges of his hair were burned, leaving him visibly annoyed once more. But now wasn't the time to worry about hair. Realizing that Ryuhan had survived, the Hell Dog began casting multiple spells. Ryuhan responded by carving up a block from the ground to defend himself. Then he launched a follow-up strike, but surprisingly missed. He still wasn't proficient with blades due to his reset level. However, he still had his secret move, one that had helped him defeat tens of thousands of Hell Dogs before, the cross-impact triple-cross attack, a technique that combined all three of his core skills. With that move, Ryuhan smiled, knowing he had managed to survive another brutal day. Meanwhile, in another realm, a white figure finally realized something shocking. The kid who had once gotten bugged in the system was still alive in the Telaratna. That incident had happened 4 generations ago, meaning 22 years had passed. The white figure began to panic, realizing he had no excuse to cover this up. Looking at Ryuhan's stats, he couldn't comprehend how someone could have survived this long, but just then, a spark of inspiration hit him, and he ground all 32 of his teeth, as a devious plan formed in his mind. Back in the Telaratna, Ryuhan was quietly eating as he examined his extra stats. He wondered how strong he had become, and thought about how much longer he would have to live like this. Still, he chose to remain positive, holding on to the hope that one day he would finally meet other people again. Suddenly, a bright light appeared in the sky. Ryuhan didn't know what it meant, but something after so long was finally happening. Unbeknownst to him, it was the doing of the white figure. After all these years, the system had begun moving again, and the white figure had decided to try getting rid of Ryuhan by erasing his records and sending him to a certain place. As lightning cracked through the sky, we saw a powerful dragon growing agitated at the arrival of what she described as otherworldly demons. Ryuhan was filled with all kinds of emotions, as finally the day had come when the sky wasn't red. He jumped up, unable to believe his eyes were witnessing a beautiful blue sky. Soon, giddiness kicked in and he fell to the ground, although his happiness was still on cloud 9. He wasn't sure what was going on, as he was suddenly level 5, had gained a communication skill, and found himself standing on the northern Rathna continent. So once again, he tried to ask the guideline system, but it was still bugged. After all, it hadn't helped him in 20 years, so what was he expecting? He spotted a screen he hadn't seen before. It read that his final mission was to slay one of the 6 goddesses of Rathna. The rewards for this would be returning back to Earth in an eternal body and receiving 3 wishes. In addition, the screen also instructed him to keep his identity secret and to go register at a hunter's guild. As he was busy reading all of this, a monster suddenly appeared, and it was a dragon. Considering Ryuhan's luck, he should have been happy it wasn't the goddess already. Well, the dragon didn't seem pleased, so Ryuhan reached for his sword to fix her mood, but his sword wasn't with him. He had dropped it near the water. The dragon wasn't willing to wait for him, so he had no choice but to use his fists. The dragon laughed at his strategy only until she was punched, which sent her flying without consent. Even Ryuhan was shocked to see how easily he had defeated her. After this, they heard the really sad story about how the dragon had been bullied by otherworldly people. The story was so sad, he didn't even want to talk about it, so moving on. They learned she was actually a wyvern since dragons had 4 legs. Ryuhan wasn't interested in this detail. What he wanted to know was how she knew he was from another world. She told him she couldn't tell just by looking. She only knew when they died and their bodies disappeared. In conclusion, no one would be able to tell Ryuhan's identity, and the dragon had just been assuming he was from another world. He further inquired if this was the Gratitude Kingdom as the guidelines said, but the wyvern responded that it was now called the X-Rad Kingdom, as the previous one had been destroyed. Ryuhan was a bit annoyed by this new information and asked her why she attacked him. She explained it was because he was an otherworldly demon, which wasn't exactly the right word to use in her situation. Scared, she mentioned the goddess, which piqued Ryuhan's interest. Before she could say anything further, she asked Ryuhan if she could go home and rub some medicine on herself since she was in pain. He didn't understand her very well, but decided to go with her, so she couldn't run away. The wyvern told him that at first the otherworldly humans and Rathians had gotten along. Soon, however, they started killing the Rathians in order to level up. The more powerful among them banded together and formed a group called Great Earth to try to kill the goddess. There was no way to fight against them when they were being led by a level 100 leader. So, before they came, the continent's 4 heroes, Baro, Zenobia, Garhan, and Holian, massacred them. In conclusion, the otherworldly had made a contract with the wicked demon god, so they were quickly executed when their identity was found out. Hearing all of this wasn't very pleasant for Ryuhan, as he had finally escaped that rock after dozens of years, and now he had to suffer for something that had happened before he even came here. Not that he was the kind of man to give up. He was determined to kill the demon god and get back home. But before that, he needed to take care of someone who knew his identity. The wyvern promised not to tell anyone, but all anyone heard after that was a scream. Who knew what had happened to that poor thing? 5 days passed by, and Ryuhan finally reached Onpus City. The city was located near a safe forest and a dungeon in the Ifen Plains, so most people who came to this place were hunters or otherworldly beings. As Ryuhan entered the guild, everyone assumed he was already a hunter from his physique, but as soon as he stated he wanted to register, everyone suddenly reached for their weapons. Once a moment ago back at the cave, the wyvern was safe. Ryuhan asked for her help in getting equipment and clothes so he could blend in. She was a bit hesitant as she assumed Ryuhan would kill her afterward anyway, but Ryuhan told her that she couldn't really go and tell other people about him since she was also wanted for killing. As she gave it a thought, Ryuhan added that he felt nice having a conversation with someone after so long. This touched the wyvern's heart as she remembered her old friends. She agreed to help and threw him some clothes. He started stripping in front of her, which flustered her a bit. He argued that she was also naked, to which the wyvern had no response. He somehow got into his new clothes and the wyvern taught the country boy some common sense. But he was more interested in how he could meet the goddess. For that, she told him he would need to become one of the 4 heroes or perform a great service to receive their blessing, which was not easy. So the best course of action was to become a hunter and hunt monsters in dungeons, which were created by the demon god Ormflaus. Ryuhan mentioned that the guideline system also said this, but he seemed to be the only one who could see it. He further told the wyvern that it was broken, so he didn't have much to go on, yet she seemed interested in what it said. Entering the guild, Ryuhan tried to act natural, especially after the wyvern had put so much time into helping him, but he was barely holding himself together as he registered himself with the name Eric Garoon. As the receptionist welcomed him, he felt relieved and thankful for the wyvern's help. However, he mentioned that he wanted to become a hunter. Everyone became very suspicious about his identity, since he wasn't already a hunter despite his physique. Ryuhan immediately noticed the change in the atmosphere, but he remained calm as he was told to place his hand on the measuring stone. Everyone closely observed to see his abilities. He slowly moved his hand toward the stone, as he couldn't back down now. Meanwhile, everyone else readied their weapons before moving on. We, along with the wyvern, were then shown the beautiful dreams of Ryuhan, which I can say with confidence, she didn't want to see. Back at the guild, everyone laughed in relief as he turned out to be just a level 5 swordsman. Ryuhan was confused about what was going on. The receptionist apologized for mistaking him for an otherworldly human. He learned that most of them were level 20, and they still came to register as hunters despite their high level, which was an obvious giveaway. The registration fee was 300x. Hearing this, Ryuhan almost lost his soul as he had hoped to spend 6 months with the 400x he took from the wyvern. As he left with the badge, his hand trembled, having spent most of his money. Ryuhan was determined to make a name for himself, so he requested a dungeon exploration quest. Hearing this, a typical cocky-looking guy showed up, telling Ryuhan to know his place, being only level 5. The receptionist asked him if he was planning to go to the same forest, as the monsters in the dungeon were increasing in numbers and causing trouble. He responded that he had to, as he was the only high-level person there. This helped everyone understand how talented he was at being anointed. Ryuhan didn't understand what the big deal was. He was the same level as Ifir the wyvern, although he was still a bit higher than the people at the guild. Ryuhan still didn't want to get involved with him, which, in my opinion, was a very good decision, but fate had different plans for unlucky Ryuhan. As the receptionist mentioned, Mr. Annoying still had room in his party. She told Ryuhan to join it as he wouldn't be able to do missions alone and could also learn more about the job. However, there was still hope, as Laudez already had a newbie, so there was no room. The newbie introduced herself as Atin, as she lied about being a level 25 mage, hiding her true level. Ryuhan instantly looked away from her in order to be less suspicious. Just when everyone thought he was safe, Mr. Annoying decided to take Ryuhan, the insect, into his party due to his love for Miss Saguri, the receptionist. Ryuhan tried to ignore the disrespect, but Laudez kept intruding into his space. As he unsuccessfully tried to lift Ryuhan's sword, annoyed by this, Ryuhan drew his sword, picking up Laudez with it. As everyone cheered for them to fight, a man looked at Ryuhan and expressed that he had found who he was looking for. Everyone was shocked to see Ryuhan's strength, which was a bit odd. Why couldn't they see his physique until now? Well, at least one person noticed the premium meat standing before him. That person was a man named Burke. He praised Ryuhan's body while warning him to be careful not to destroy the guild if he didn't want to fight everyone. Taking his advice, Ryuhan quickly sheathed his sword, not wanting to escalate things. Lotus, lying on the ground and feeling disrespected, lashed out by saying no one would take a weak level 5 like Ryuhan into their party. Ryuhan, though, began to worry. He needed money and a way to level up. Seeing this, Burke stepped in and assured Ryuhan he didn't need to worry. Someone with his physique would level up quickly. He mentioned that he had been looking for someone like Ryuhan and offered him a place in his own party. The old man clearly recognized the value of Ryuhan's muscles and waited keenly for his response. Although Ryuhan knew he wouldn't be able to stay in the party long due to his rapid growth rate, he gladly accepted the offer. In Opera City, a place sustained by hunters who brought back monster materials for crafting and trade, we finally saw Burke's party in action. The old man tanked the monsters' attacks, while their spearman Amber acted as the damage dealer. In the heat of battle, Burke got injured, and Amber quickly showed concern, sparking a touch of romance between them. But before anything could develop, they were interrupted by Erwin, the old man's sister and the party's healer. She swiftly healed his wounds. Meanwhile, a lurking monster tried to bite her, but it was taken out by Huber, their support member. With these four, the party had earned a reputation as the most reliable and well-coordinated in the city, making it the perfect team for Ryuhan. However, there was one catch. The only role available for him was the bag boy. Despite that, the party shared profits equally, and even left weaker monsters for Ryuhan. Yet sensing something unusual about him, the monsters sent their boss after him, but even the boss was taken out in the blink of an eye. The infamous stone bullet wasn't even a real skill. Ryuhan was just throwing rocks. Still, he didn't gain any experience because the monster was too low level according to the system. Soon after, Erwin came to retrieve him as the hunting was finished. Back at the camp, Erwin butchered the monster for materials. Everyone laughed and smiled. It was a warm and joyful evening shared together. Ryuhan fit right in, having spent 20 years carving up hell dogs. Hearing this, Erwin curiously asked how old he was. Ryuhan replied that he was 24, as he had stopped aging after that. This surprised the others, who then inquired about his parents. Ryuhan admitted he had been kidnapped so long ago that he didn't even remember their faces. Moved by this, the party teared up and accepted him as one of their own. As Ryuhan thanked them for accepting him despite his low level, Burke told him that levels weren't everything. He himself had been level 25 for 5 years. Ryuhan found that a bit odd, as Burke was still level 25. Eventually he realized the reason. There were no high-level monsters outside the dungeons. The strongest one in the area had been Lord Vivalk, whom Ryuhan had already defeated. The real shock came when Ryuhan found out the party had no intention of going into dungeons. Hearing this, he abruptly stood up and told everyone he was going to practice with his sword. Concerned for him, Hubert followed, but was unable to find him. Meanwhile, Ryuhan ran through the forest, frustrated to discover that there truly were no monsters left that could grant him experience. He recalled that even monsters as strong as Epher hadn't earned him any EXP, which made him question what his true level actually was. As he turned to head back, he sensed a monster resembling a hell dog, though smaller in size. Regardless, he rushed toward it, hoping this would be his chance to level up. Reaching the destination, Ryuhan reached for his sword but was startled when the monster he'd sensed turned out to be a half-naked girl from Mr. Annoying's party. But instead of a girl, it turned out to be a guy. Regardless, Ryuhan quickly tried to leave as he still needed to find that monster, but he was stopped by Aise, who found him suspicious for searching for strong monsters despite being a level 5. Ryuhan told him he only came because of the sound and once again tried to leave, saying his party was waiting for him. Unsatisfied, Aise stopped Ryuhan, using his fire magic, demanding he answer truthfully if he had seen the monster. Annoyed, Ryuhan grabbed the burning wand and extinguished the flame. He told Aise he was sick of him and Laudi's mistreating him just because his level was lower. That hadn't been his intention. Aise admitted his mistake. However, Ryuhan had a bigger annoyance to deal with, as Laudis showed up, looking furious after misunderstanding the situation. Being a magic swordsman, he struck a ridiculous pose and released his attack. Ryuhan told Aise to put on some clothes and ignored the fool. Laudis charged forward with his attack. Although Ryuhan was a bit hesitant to do this, he set aside his pride, bowed, and apologized to Laudis. Still in mid-attack, Laudis was unable to stop and ended up getting hit in the groin by the sword's handle. As Ryuhan sat there, remorseful, he felt terrible and told Berkman he wouldn't be able to forgive himself for causing a man such horrible pain. Erwin stepped forward to deliver the grim news. Laudi's life was not in danger, but he had lost something far more precious. Every man in the room understood that pain and felt powerless to help him. The next morning, Aise escorted Ryuhan back to Opris after confessing the truth, which devastated the poor man. They learned that Lauds had gone alone into a dungeon. Ryuhan didn't understand why Amber thought that was a suicide mission, assuming Lauds was a fairly high-level hunter. She explained that although he had leveled up, the monsters he fought were never high-level ones. Moreover, dungeon monsters were different. They weren't originally from this world, but were created by the dungeons set up by the evil god Ormflaus. Amber added that these monsters usually started at level 30 or higher, which made Ryuhan wonder if he could secretly level up there himself. His plan, however, quickly faced some bumps when he learned that getting clearance to enter a dungeon was no simple task. Otherworlders often snuck in to power level, so screening was strict. Putting aside his schemes for the moment, he asked why Lalaise had wanted to go there so badly. Berkman replied that Lalaise was probably searching for an artifact. Such artifacts came in all shapes and offered various abilities, and Leodus likely wanted the one rumored to heal any wound. That night, when everyone went to sleep, Ryuhan sneaked out. As he wandered the dark, creepy forest, he had no clue where to find a monster, so he decided to ask Ifir since she lived nearby. Unfortunately, he soon realized he had no idea where her house actually was. Still, by sheer luck, he stumbled upon some monsters. He was shocked to see them, even though he'd been looking for exactly this. Behind him stood a level 31 monster that, according to the guidelines, typically lived only inside dungeons and was immune to sword attacks. Ryuhan was confused about why it was out here in the first place. Muttering something about having no other choice, the monsters were clearly plotting something. Ryuhan decided to strike anyway, and unsurprisingly, his sword attack worked. The monster started ranting nonsense, but quickly came to its senses and ran away. Since it had taken him so long to find any monsters at all, Ryuhan wasn't about to let them escape. Following them like a creep through the trees, he eventually tracked them back to their hideout, which turned out to be a portal. The portal turned out to be the open plain dungeon. Ryuhan guessed that this might be the reason why the monsters were not following their usual path and were instead attacking civilians. So he decided to do what he did best: interrogate monsters. He asked the ugly fellow if they were the ones who had created this portal, but the monster told him they had no magic. Still having his doubts, Ryuhan threatened to destroy the portal, which caused the monster to panic and reveal that no one could go in. According to that person's order, although Ryuhan wasn't aware whose order it was, he decided to go in anyway. He also tricked the monster into guarding the portal by making him think it would only benefit him. Inside the dungeon, some hunters were struggling to fend off the monsters. The monsters were immune to physical attacks, unlike what we'd seen with Ryuhan. The party's healer, Alicia, ended up getting her leg pierced by one of the creatures. In a panic, she cast a blinding spell, which also accidentally hit her ally. The boy was unable to see out of one eye, but was still more concerned about his comrades as their party was slowly being killed. He prayed for help, but their end seemed imminent as one of the monsters crept up behind him. Blood gushed, but it was from the monster that had just been beheaded by someone. Looking at the corpse, the boy realized how someone had first made the Tatiros lower its arm, then slashed its head in a second strike. Seeing the red glow, it all started to make sense. It was a dual-wielding magic swordsman. The boy knew Rude and found him amazing, unaware that he had actually been struggling to survive in the dungeon ever since he arrived 70 days ago. We learned that Rude had ended up in the dungeon after getting drunk one night, and the only reason he hadn't left was because he didn't know how. Meanwhile, the story going around was that Laudus was searching for a healing artifact to cure his untreatable injury. Seeing that Atihis was injured, he used his high potion on him despite how rare they were. Atihis suspected he was only doing this because she was a girl, but Ladis insisted it was just because the potion was useless for his own injury. In truth, he simply didn't want any extra difficulties if she collapsed. Atihis promised that one day he would repay the debt, but for now, Raud told them they should head back, using her injury as an excuse. As they were returning, Raud and the others suddenly stopped because of what felt like an earthquake, but the boy knew there were no earthquakes in the dungeon, meaning it had to be a monster. Rowdy told them to leave through a side path because he didn't want to look uncool in front of a girl. She hesitated, but he insisted she go, saying it was coming. The boy took Atis and left, not wanting to be a burden on Raoud. But in truth, Raoud hadn't wanted him to leave either. Now that it had come to this, he decided to stand and fight. He immediately began running when he saw a large horde of monsters, but strangely enough, they all seemed to be fleeing from something deeper inside the dungeon. We soon learned the reason for their terror. It was none other than Ryu Han. He was trying to gain experience while also being careful not to destroy the dungeon walls with his sword. The monsters reported him to their boss, who, despite all instincts telling him to flee, decided to stay and fight. The experienced, hungry Ryu Han burst in, breaking through the wall and killing the boss without even realizing it. His eyes immediately went to the fireball bracelet artifact, which he cluelessly wondered why it wasn't being guarded. After mulling over countless thoughts in his mind, he decided to take the artifact, thinking it would be handy since it could throw fireballs instantly. Getting into a Kamehameha stance, Ryuhan began to slowly say, "Fire! Fireball!" And upon unleashing it, we learn that monsters don't breed but are manufactured by the dungeon in special zones. These areas are the sources of magic, which for some reason take the form of items or artifacts. Considering Ryu-han's luck, it's unsurprising that the artifact didn't work. The reason, once again, is his low level. He takes it off, thinking the artifact is trash for him since he can't use it. However, he considers selling it. After all, one man's trash is another man's treasure, but it might be a little suspicious if a level 5 suddenly showed up with such an item. As he deals with this dilemma, the floor under his feet shifts, and a passageway appears. Seeing it, Ryu-han smiles, believing it leads to the boss room. Following the path, he comes upon a massive door. When he enters, he's met with an empty hallway and a single item resting in the middle of the room. The item is a magic source, which Ryu-han announces he will take if no one shows up to stop him. Not wanting to become homeless, the dungeon boss finally appears and grabs Ryu-han with its tentacle. Seeing that it's level 45, Ryu-han finally feels hopeful about gaining some experience. But suddenly, Raud shows up out of nowhere. Raud, being the genius that he is, assumes the monster is using his trauma and has conjured a fake, because in his mind there's no way Ryu-han, a mere level 5, could have made it here. Ryu-han goes along with the misunderstanding, not wanting to get exposed. Raud charges at him while the monster aims for his blind spot. Ryu-han sees this and saves him, simultaneously jumping to evade the attack coming from below. If I didn't know any better, I'd say Raud had some kind of grudge against him. In the chaos, Ryu-han ends up damaging the boss, only to be disappointed by how weak the monster feels. Raud charges at him again in anger while Ryu-han dodges. The tentacle monster manages to grab Raud, but it's not much of an issue since the creature is too weak to threaten Ryu-han. Unable to control his pent-up frustration, Raud relentlessly attacks Ryu-han, while the tentacle blob gets thrown around the room. Still clutching Ryu-han's arm in the confusion, Raud blames Ryu-han for ruining his chance with Aise, which is not true, as we all know. His anger leads him to become a pawn of the tentacle blob, which feels disrespected by Ryu-han and decides to use his supposed friend as a shield. The blob prepares to finish Ryu-han by forcing his companion's hand, a baseless assumption on its part. Seeing that Ryu-han doesn't care about gaining experience, the tentacle blob makes a new plan. It decides to turn Raud into a mid-level boss. With a grotesque flourish, it gives Raud a huge mutated arm and orders him to attack Ryu-han. The fight ended before it even began properly, as Ryu-han took care of both the tentacle boss and Raud in a matter of seconds. He was thoroughly disappointed by the level 45 boss, who realized too late that he'd been defeated by nothing more than the wind pressure from Ryu-han's sword swing. While Ryu-han wondered about his real level, the tentacle blob began plotting. Leaving behind his main body, he transformed into a small, one-eyed, bat-like creature and flew off, intent on telling someone about Ryu-han before he could claim the magic source. Although Ryu-han noticed him, he wasn't particularly interested and decided to simply head back. Suddenly, on his system screen, he saw something regarding 54.5 billion points, which startled him. The next morning, the Berkman party was up early, with Berkman flexing his muscles as usual. Erwin, however, was worried sick. She couldn't find Ryu-han anywhere. As the rest of the group confirmed they hadn't seen him either, panic set in. What if he had gone into the forest alone? Just then, Ryu-han returned, casually carrying a monster over his shoulder. Erwin immediately questioned where he had gone and what had happened. Ryu-han simply replied, "Nothing happened." But in truth, he had earned 113,000 XP from killing the tentacle boss. He did some quick calculations. The hell dogs he used to fight only gave him 2,558 XP, and it had taken 1,100 XP to reach level 5. So by logic, it should take around 2,200 XP to get to level 6. Excited, he eagerly checked the guideline system, only to nearly collapse in shock. The requirement for level 6 was a staggering 54.5 billion XP. The trauma from that discovery stayed with him for a while. After a week of searching, the party couldn't find a single monster outside the forest. Eventually, they all returned to the city. As their carriage stopped at the city gate, a guard demanded a pass. The old man Berkman got grumpy hearing this. No one in the party quite understood what this was about, so Berkman decided to investigate personally. They were in luck. The man at the gate turned out to be Berkman's nephew, Goryman. He informed them that the Hunters Guild had called everyone back because the Even Plains dungeon had been cleared. The mood immediately turned grim. Ryu-han was confused. Shouldn't that be good news? But Huber explained otherwise. Apparently, whoever cleared the dungeon didn't report or register it. Normally, clearing a dungeon was a tremendous honor for a hunter, as long as they claimed the magic source. But only other worlders tend to hide their involvement in dungeon clears. The real problem, however, began with the arrival of the Inquisitor. Their job was to hunt and execute otherworlders, but in truth, they tortured anyone they deemed even remotely suspicious, especially people level 20 and above. Ryuhan immediately grew worried about Amber and Mr. Berkman, but there was little he could do. Despite the tense situation, Mr. Berkman stayed optimistic, saying their hard work still meant something. He decided to trade the monster stones at the guild and told Ryuhan to accompany Amber to Baltan's shop to sell the remaining materials. Everyone smiled as they sent him off, promising to celebrate once he returned. Ryuhan cheerfully agreed, saying he could go alone. Ember tried to stop him, warning that he might not know the actual value of the materials, but the old man believed that Ryuhan would recognize their worth on his own. However, things didn't go as expected. At Baltan's shop, the merchant refused to buy anything due to the recent events surrounding the dungeon. Ryuhan even tried offering the materials at half price, but Baltan was firm in his refusal. Suddenly, a hooded figure entered the shop. Upon seeing him, Baltan nearly fainted. The man was an inquisitor from the Church of Darkness. Learning his identity, Ryuhan instinctively tried to check his level but was unable to see it. Out of nowhere, the inquisitor turned to Ryuhan and asked coldly, "Were you trying to see my level?" and failed. Even shocking Ryuhan, the inquisitor instructed everyone to continue their discussion, saying he was late and would simply stand in line. Baltan started shouting upon seeing him, identifying him as an inquisitor from the Church of Darkness. The inquisitor expressed his gratitude for the introduction. Ryuhan wondered whether he truly belonged to a church and was confused by the fact that his level couldn't be measured. The inquisitor commented that Eric seemed to have some invaluable materials for sale and stepped right in front of him, startling Eric considerably. Observing his expression, the inquisitor remarked that Eric clearly couldn't gauge his level. The level was listed as unmeasurable, indicating it couldn't be read. Eric responded that he couldn't discern the Inquisitor's level just by looking, unlike beings from other worlds who could see levels through their system. He thought the Inquisitor must be incredibly strong to have appeared in front of him so suddenly. Standing before Eric and towering over him, the Inquisitor asked why he looked so nervous. Eric admitted he was nervous, explaining that stepping back might only provoke the Inquisitor to chase after him. When asked about his religious beliefs, Eric said he wasn't religious and didn't believe in any god. The Inquisitor then inquired about his favorite fairy tale. Eric replied that, as an orphan, he had never heard one. The Inquisitor continued, noting that Eric came from a small village, had no known parents, and appeared to be a suspicious figure from another world. Eric clarified that he hadn't been a hunter for long and insisted he was just a human. The Inquisitor speculated that Eric's level should be low, perhaps around 21 or 22. He quickly retrieved a badge and placed it on Eric's hand to check. The badge revealed Eric's level was 5. The Inquisitor lifted his helmet and looked up, visibly astonished. A level 5 was shockingly low. Eric took the opportunity to shift the focus and remarked that he could now sell his goods. He took out the materials and handed them to Mr. Baltan. Baltan, while inspecting them, commented on Eric's calmness in front of an inquisitor. He acknowledged the items were of good quality but added that he would still need to negotiate even if someone came wanting to buy them. In the end, he decided not to pay Eric anything. As Baltan examined the bag, his attention was drawn to an artifact, a fireball artifact. Eric's attention remained fixed on the Inquisitor, relieved that his low level spared him from suspicion. Still, he had his doubts. He couldn't gauge the Inquisitor's level due to the mask, but he suspected the man's strength was immense. Baltan picked up the artifact and inspected it, realizing it was far too valuable to belong to someone of Eric's level. As Eric reached out to retrieve it, the artifact slipped from Baltan's hand and rolled to the Inquisitor's feet. The Inquisitor paused, picked it up and examined it, concluding it was special and powerful, definitely not something a level 5 should possess. Seeing this, Baltan hastily left. Eric stood frozen, wondering what excuse he should make now. He had expected a simple level check and then departure. Now, he was unsure whether to claim ignorance or say he had simply found the artifact on the way. But before he could speak, the Inquisitor stepped closer and told Eric that a level 5 hunter should never have entered a dungeon, especially with such a valuable artifact. He advised Eric to keep it safe to avoid theft. Eric was surprised by how readily the Inquisitor believed he wasn't the artifact's source. Then the Inquisitor began telling a story. He described a married couple from 15 years ago. The husband was a powerful hunter, and his wife and son stayed at home. Though he wasn't the leader of his party, many followed him for his strength. One day, the party went on a quest to kill a monster. When they encountered it, the husband froze in fear and prevented anyone from approaching, despite the monster not attacking. His party members were puzzled and urged him to face it. Under pressure, he confessed that the monster's level was over 800, far beyond their capabilities. His friends didn't believe him until he revealed that he was from another world and could see levels using a guidance system. Just then, the previously passive monster began to attack. Terrified, his friends fled, abandoning him. The story returned to the Inquisitor. He asked Eric who he thought would die, the man from another world fighting the monster or someone else. Eric replied, "It's obvious, the person from another world would die because he revealed his identity." The Inquisitor said that was incorrect. The one who would die was the party leader. He had gone to the church to report the presence of an otherworlder in his party. Upon learning this, the church inquisitor arrested and investigated everyone, and many of them died during the process. Eventually, the otherworlder emerged alive from the dungeon, having survived the monster's attack. But when he returned home, he found his village in ruins. The villagers had discovered his identity and burned his family alive. In turn, he killed them and fled. The Inquisitor concluded by saying that anyone who associates with someone from another world will always end up dead. Then he questioned whether Eric was capable of committing such a crime. Eric asked why he was being told this story and what it meant. The Inquisitor explained that the person who gave Eric the artifact was likely from another world and probably his party leader. The story was a warning. Since Eric was just a level 5 rookie hunter, the Inquisitor intended to protect him as much as he could, but he couldn't promise safety for Eric's entire party. He asked Eric what the name of his party was. Upon hearing this, Eric rushed forward to punch the Inquisitor. Just as the punch was about to land, the Inquisitor quickly stepped back. At that moment, Aise arrived. He immediately asked the Inquisitor to forgive Eric, explaining there had been a misunderstanding. Aise said he came in person to clarify. Surprised and tense, Eric told Aise how dangerous the situation was. Aise shot him a glare and scolded him, stating that he had made a mess and was also late. Aise admitted he made a mistake by giving the valuable artifact to Garrick. Feeling like a child, Eric sat down in panic. The Inquisitor asked who Aise was. He introduced himself as Aise Bannister, the 37th head of the Bannister family. The Inquisitor checked the badge and commented that he had heard the Bannister family was extinct, but here he was, standing with the badge. Aise explained that although it was tough, he was doing his best to restore his family's honor. The Inquisitor replied that he couldn't remove his mask due to official duties, then asked Aise what his connection to Eric was. Aise responded that Eric was his servant, recently hired despite his good physical appearance. He added that Eric was rather clueless and slow-witted. Eric was stunned to hear himself described this way and felt uneasy. Aise stepped in, clarifying that he had asked Eric to bring the artifact for magical research. The Inquisitor asked about his own interest in magical artifacts. Though Eric didn't fully understand the exchange, he felt compelled to get involved. He walked up to Aise and apologized, begging for forgiveness, only to be sharply criticized for his bad acting. Aise then said he had to return to his research and began to leave. They bid farewell and walked away. Eric thanked Aise for helping and apologized for the trouble. Aise warned him not to try acting again in front of anyone. It was terrible. As they walked, Eric placed the artifact back in his bag and said he was sorry for dragging Aise into this. When he saw him in the forest, he asked what part of him seemed suspicious. Just then, the Inquisitor asked one final question: what is this artifact's ability? Eric says fireball, Aise says electric, and the Inquisitor says sorry. He apologized and informed them that they both had to come with him to jail. On his first day with the Berkman party, Eric found himself navigating the forest alone, growing increasingly frustrated as he tried to level up. He encountered a tree ogre, a giant rooster, and a mud slime monsters that fell with a single strike, yet none of them gave him the much-needed experience points. He began comparing them to demon dogs, thinking even those gave him more XP than these lowly creatures. Still, he continued relentlessly killing the monsters in hopes of raising his level. Back at the camp, Berkman called out to Garrick, who was lost in his thoughts, and offered him a plate of food as a welcoming gesture. Berkman presented the meal with a touch of humor, but Ember exploded in mock anger at the suggestion that her cooking might be supper. She warned Eric that being accepted into the party meant proving his worth and accepting whatever he was given. One of the party members mocked him, claiming he wouldn't last long in the party. Although Eric suspected there might be some mischief involved with the food, he figured it couldn't be worse than the helldog meat he'd been eating. Grateful not to be alone anymore, he sat down to eat. Despite the spicy flavor, he found the meal surprisingly delicious. Much to the party's amusement, he even asked for seconds, showing his willingness to embrace the fellowship. Then they finally revealed that the entire meal was a prank. He shouldn't have eaten it all, but that day, for the first time, he felt like he had escaped the nightmare of the mountain and returned to the present. As the Inquisitor released his powers, creating a massive wind vortex around them, Eric asked Aise what was happening, wondering if this was some kind of wind magic. The gust was intense, but Aise quickly dismissed the idea, saying he didn't sense any mana in the air and realized that this must be a special ability. He also recognized that the Inquisitor wasn't just any low-level magician. Hearing this, Eric realized that confronting the Inquisitor wouldn't be easy. If the Inquisitor went all out, he might even discover that Eric was from another world. Standing within the large wind barrier, the Inquisitor warned them that even if he cut off their arms and legs, they wouldn't die. They'd remain alive. He offered a deal. If they cooperated, they could walk out with their own feet. Eric, realizing there was no way to escape and that Aise was now caught up in his mess, stepped forward. He confronted the Inquisitor, asking if they were searching for the dungeon closer, and boldly offered to help them find that person, hoping they would leave without causing harm. The Inquisitor deactivated his powers and agreed, saying they would lead as long as they found the hunter who closed the dungeon. Just as Eric was about to reveal that he was the one who had done it, a loud voice interrupted from the side. Everyone turned to see a horse-drawn carriage approaching, with a man standing on top shouting that he was the hero who cleared the dungeon. Eric and the Inquisitor were both stunned as they watched the scene unfold. Mr. Roud, standing proudly atop the carriage, claimed he was the one responsible for closing the dungeon by taking the artifact. With Jack and Alicia by his side, he looked every bit the hero. Jack sarcastically remarked that they had thought he might have died in the dungeon, given the monsters inside, and had never expected to see him alive. The man eagerly recounted how he had passed out inside the dungeon, and when he woke up, the boss was already dead. Assuming he had defeated it before losing consciousness, he took the artifact which caused the dungeon to vanish. Starving and stranded on a barren plain, Jack and Alicia eventually found him and brought him into their carriage as they were leaving the city. Initially, Mr. Roud was thrilled, imagining himself as a legendary hero. However, his excitement quickly faded when the Church Inquisitors captured him. Despite his protests, the Inquisitors documented everything and concluded that he, Roud, Estelpia, a 21-year-old with an artifact from the dungeon, was the culprit. Eric, watching from a distance, was surprised. He had thought Mr. Roud had fully transformed into a monster. Aise was equally shocked. After finishing their investigation, the Inquisitor apologized for his mistake. Aise asked about Roud's fate, and the Inquisitor explained that further investigation was necessary. Roud would not be freed anytime soon. The Inquisitor then called Eric over and handed him the documents, explaining that with the signatures on them, Eric would be allowed to sell his goods anywhere. Artis took a deep breath and said, "Thank God no one was hurt." Eric just stood there silently for a moment, then suddenly turned and called out to Artis, asking if he could do one thing for him. The scene then shifted to the Onfrost Hunter Guild. The receptionist was apologizing to Berkman, who responded that she didn't need to be sorry. After all, their guildmaster had run away. The receptionist began to cry, explaining that she didn't know Berkman's party hadn't been contacted. Berkman said it was okay. Everyone had left in a hurry and it couldn't be helped. He gently pressed the girl, reminding her that she had still protected the place. We then saw Berkman's party. Ewan questioned Amber about whether she had been able to sell all the demon stones. Amber dropped some coins on the table and said, "This is all of it." Hubert responded, "Only 5 silver coins?" Amber replied, "No, this is the only money the guild has." Herbert and Ewan asked what she meant. Ember, filled with rage, said the guildmaster had run off with all the guild's money, and they hadn't called Berkman's party because they knew they would have noticed something was wrong. Berkman chimed in, saying that because of that, the beer was now free. Ember snapped back in anger, yelling, "How could she drink beer now? We totally have no money. If the guild goes bankrupt, we won't even get our commission." Berkman sat beside her and asked if she remembered 20 years ago when he decided to protect this remote village that had neither a dungeon nor a guild, and how, at that time, he had insisted on being a lone hunter. Ember replied that she'd saved him hundreds of times back then. Berkman continued, saying that it didn't matter whether there was a guild or not. He had been with her since that day, and his heart hadn't changed at all. Amber responded, saying he was like that, and that was why she was still single. Then she began to blush. Berkman continued, saying, "If I'm not too late," but before he could finish, Hubert called out to Berkman, saying there were a lot of snacks here. Suddenly, Amber attacked Hubert in a rage. Then she turned back to Berkman and said, "Should we say more things after the celebratory party for Eric? Just the two of us, alone?" Berkman answered nervously and tried to gather everyone up. At that moment, someone opened the guild door, and everyone shifted their attention toward it. Everyone had expected to see Eric arrive with his usual determined gait, but they were met with a surprising sight. Aise, staggering under the weight of an enormous bag, appeared instead. He was clearly struggling, his breaths ragged and shoulders trembling as he approached. Mr. Buckman, puzzled by the sight, immediately questioned why Aise was here in Eric's place and why he was carrying Eric's bag. Aise barely managed to respond. He was panting heavily and asked for help before collapsing right there in front of everyone. The massive bag fell on top of him with a heavy thud. Mr. Buckman rushed forward, lifting the bag off Aten's and helping him sit upright. Aten, still gasping, commented in disbelief that Eric must be incredibly strong to carry something so heavy with ease. Mr. Buckman, concerned and confused, pressed further, asking why Aten had the bag and where Eric was. Ewen, inspecting the bag, noted that it didn't contain any materials. This only deepened the mystery. What had happened to the materials, and more importantly, where was Eric? Aise explained in a strained voice that Eric had told him to deliver the bag. He didn't know anything else. As the others continued to inspect it, Amber made a startling discovery. The bag was filled with stacks of money. She informed Mr. Buckman of the contents, and Hubert added more detail, stating that each bag within contained 1,000x, amounting to a total of 10,000x. Everyone was stunned. The sheer amount of money was overwhelming, and they couldn't believe that Eric had managed to gather such a large sum. It didn't add up. The items Eric had been carrying back at Aise wouldn't have fetched anywhere near that amount. The final shock came when Aise pulled out a dragon badge from the bag, Eric's hunter badge, and handed it to Mr. Buckman. Holding the badge in his hand, Buckman looked at it solemnly, realizing this symbolized Eric's resignation from the hunter's path. He asked in disbelief if Eric had truly quit, and why he would make such a decision without a word. Aise could only say that Eric hadn't explained anything to him. Elsewhere, Eric was walking alone through a desolate alley, his expression filled with fear and confusion. A flashback revealed that the Inquisitor had confronted him earlier, showing him a badge that bore the insignia of the Great Earth Group, an organization supposedly long destroyed by the four great heroes. Eric was deeply shaken, staring at the badge and remembering that this group was supposed to be a relic of the past. He stammered, claiming he had no knowledge of the badge. The Inquisitor calmly put it back into a box, saying that it was understandable for a level 5 hunter not to recognize it, especially one who wasn't from another world. He added that if Eric ever did recognize it, he should remember the ancient story tied to it. These cryptic words left Eric feeling cornered and terrified, especially for his party's safety. Overwhelmed by his spiraling thoughts, Eric lashed out and punched a cart in frustration, breaking it with a single blow. The damage caught the attention of 3 men nearby, all of them smoking and clearly looking for trouble. Unbeknownst to Eric, the cart he had just destroyed belonged to them. Back at the guild, Eric's absence cast a heavy shadow over the group. The remaining members were stunned and confused by his sudden decision to leave. Hubert was especially upset, insisting that Eric couldn't simply walk away without a word and demanding answers. Mr. Buckman, however, calmly acknowledged the truth. Eric's return of the badge was a clear declaration that he had left hunting behind. Even so, Hubert was determined to talk to him and convince him otherwise. Buckman advised patience, explaining that this kind of sudden decision was not uncommon in their line of work. Before Aise departed, Mr. Buckman asked him to let Eric know that if he ever wanted to return, he would always be welcome. Aise agreed and left, but his thoughts were conflicted. He felt that he hadn't spoken to Eric properly, and a quiet envy stirred in his heart. He wished he had someone like Eric's supportive family. Meanwhile, Eric's situation had taken a drastic turn. He had been captured, tied to a chair, and was now being doused with water to bring him back to consciousness. The man pouring the water stepped back to report that Eric was awake, and their boss stepped forward. A large, menacing figure who towered over Eric. Looking at the sword strapped to Eric's back, the boss deduced that Eric must be a hunter. He angrily accused Eric of attacking his men, claiming they had suffered broken limbs because of him. The 3 men, the same ones from earlier, confirmed that Eric had assaulted them and wrecked their cart. Eric, still groggy, responded calmly. He admitted that he was willing to apologize for sleeping in their territory, but insisted he had only acted in self-defense. They had attacked him first, and he hadn't broken their limbs deliberately. The 3 thugs, still nursing their injuries, begrudgingly confirmed that Eric's story was true. They also noted his incredibly durable body, suspecting that he might have used some form of magic. The boss, now furious, demanded to know what kind of magic Eric had used. Eric calmly insisted he didn't use magic at all. When the boss continued to question him, Eric taunted him, daring the man to punch him and see for himself. The boss, enraged by Eric's words and feeling mocked, finally threw a punch with all his might. But in a comical twist, it was the boss who ended up hurt, crying out in pain as his fingers were injured from hitting Eric. Eric scoffed, calling him weaker than a Tatiro monster. He looked around the room, calculating whether he should kill everyone and make his escape. However, he quickly realized there were too many people watching, observing him with both fear and curiosity. Some were wondering if he was a magical swordsman or a genuine magic user, and his unusual strength had definitely left an impression. The scene shifted again as more people entered the room. Among them was an old man referred to as the chairman. His companions, alarmed by Eric's strength, warned the chairman to stay back, concerned that Eric might be dangerous. The chairman, however, dismissed their fears with a casual attitude. He mockingly referred to Eric as a harmless little puppy that had lost its way. Eric, already annoyed, confronted the chairman about being called a dog and expressed his dislike for him. To confront the chairman about being called a dog, he asked his dislike for him. He offered to tell his story if the chairman was interested. The old man, unimpressed, brushed him off, remarking that Eric probably came from Rick Mountain. This caught Eric's attention. It surprised him that the chairman knew of that place. Curious, Eric asked how he knew about Rock Mountain. In response, the chairman simply offered a deal. He would tell Eric everything he knew, but only if Eric agreed to a contract. 6 months had passed since the destruction of the dungeon, and many people had abandoned Frost City. The once vibrant wastelands of the city had now become a bleak and desolate reflection of their former selves. In one of the rundown areas, a group of tough-looking men, including a massive figure named Eric, were clearing out a dilapidated house. The owner's wife and child protested as their belongings were taken, but the boss leading the group coldly reminded them that they had already been informed about the eviction and the removal process. As the commotion continued, a furious hunter arrived, demanding to know why his belongings were being taken. Drawing his sword, he warned the men to stop, vowing to protect his home and family at all costs. Unbothered by the threat, the boss ordered Eric, armed with what appeared to be a hammer, to proceed. However, the hunter quickly realized that Eric's hammer was actually just a heavy iron rod with a large rock tied to the end. Simple but devastating. Despite his resolve, the hunter's sword proved useless against Eric, whose tough, unyielding body remained completely unaffected. Eric remained calm, instructing the hunter to step aside. Terrified after witnessing that his blade couldn't even scratch the man, the hunter reluctantly complied. Eric then swung his crude weapon, demolishing the entire house in a single powerful blow. Watching his home collapse before his eyes, the hunter could do nothing but accept the horrifying truth. Eric wasn't an ordinary human, he was a monster in disguise. Meanwhile, the boss's team began escorting the displaced family to a newly built, sturdy home. They explained that their association was working to improve the city's living conditions. The new house, they assured, was as strong as a noble's manor, with reinforced walls and special coatings designed to repel monster attacks. In case the dungeon ever reopened and monsters flooded the city again, the walls could serve as bunkers for soldiers. One of the large, burly men explained all this to the hunter and offered him and his family free housing and maintenance as part of the association's benefits. Somewhat inebriated, the hunter expressed his gratitude, even though he couldn't remember the full details of their earlier conversation. Still, he acknowledged the current state of things, the decline in monster activity and the reduced workload for hunters. He particularly wanted to thank Eric, who had wielded the hammer, and apologized for drawing his sword at him, hoping to be forgiven for not recognizing who Eric really was. Eric, however, appeared indifferent and clearly wanted to leave. The hunter insisted on showing his gratitude and offered to share a meal, but Eric declined, claiming he was too busy. The boss, watching this unfold, was puzzled by Eric's distant behavior and refusal to engage with the others. The scene became more chaotic when the child began noisily playing around, and the boss apologized again and again, clearly embarrassed. The child even playfully mimicked the situation, adding to the confusion. Feeling increasingly out of place and overwhelmed, Eric tried to keep his composure. When the child's mother asked him not to bother her son, Eric, now visibly frustrated, began searching for his sword, only to realize it was missing. He hadn't worked as a hunter for 6 months, and without his weapon, he felt strangely powerless. Unable to handle the situation any longer, Eric walked out. The boss and another hunter, observing him, discussed his unusual behavior. They agreed it was just his general personality, not any specific event that made him act that way. The boss explained that Eric had joined the association 6 months ago, and had proven himself highly skilled and efficient. Despite his odd behavior and reluctance to socialize, his contributions had been invaluable and earned him widespread praise. Moments later, Eric stormed into the chairman's room without permission, which infuriated the older man. Ignoring his anger, Eric questioned the chairman about the infrastructure of a mysterious building he had never seen before. The chairman confirmed there was no other building like it and admitted that was why he had hired Eric in the first place, because only Eric could handle it, and he had done his job well. But Eric, unconvinced, punched the wall in frustration and demanded the chairman stop joking around. He wanted real answers about the rock mountain and the chairman's true motives. With another punch, he insisted the chairman explain what he really wanted from him. Exasperated, the chairman finally explained that 40 years ago, things had been different. Back then, both humans and other-worlders like Eric lived together in peace. Smirking, he noted that Eric probably already knew this. He pointed out that Eric's restlessness stemmed from the fact that he still considered himself an other-worldler. The chairman elaborated further. Over the years, people from different worlds had arrived, and while some became hunters, many integrated into society and contributed in other fields like architecture. He assured Eric that if he truly wished to blend in as a normal human, he had to let go of the hunter identity and continue focusing on his current role, being a functioning part of society. Eric, still confused, questioned why he had seen a hunter job request among the chairman's documents, pointing out that he had already resigned from that role. As their conversation deepened, the chairman revealed that someone had spoken to him about Eric. Just then, he pointed toward the door and ordered the person waiting outside to enter. The person who entered was none other than Aise, leaving Eric completely stunned as the door swung open. Aise, however, was delighted to see Eric and expressed his surprise at how strong and fit he looked, completely contrary to what he had expected. Eric, suddenly self-conscious, instinctively tried to hide his face, worried that Aise had managed to find him. The chairman, noticing this, reassured Eric there was no need to conceal his face. With such a large build, he was noticeable from a mile away. He also mentioned that he had already heard Eric's story from Aise, who frequently visited him. But now, understanding Eric's concern, the chairman agreed to try and drive Aise away if it meant protecting Eric from being taken, despite his previous willingness to go along with Aise's plan. Internally, Eric pleaded for Aise's forgiveness, fearing that being seen together might endanger Aise and draw the church's attention toward him as well. Meanwhile, Aise remarked on how rare it was to be invited into the chairman's office, noting that their previous interactions had only occurred through letters. He introduced himself as Aise Bannister, a magician, and admitted that although he likely came from the Forest Hunter Guild, this visit was a personal matter. The chairman, unwilling to let Eric go, stood his ground, insisting that Eric, once a hunter, was now a valuable member of the Architecture Association. He emphasized that Eric was one of their own and made it clear that he absolutely would not allow Aise to take him away. His tone became harsher as he angrily challenged Aise, questioning how he even dared to come here and demand to take Eric back. He firmly declared that members of the Architecture Association were not inferior to those of the Hunter Guild, and that Aise had no right to interfere. Aise calmly stepped forward and clarified that he wasn't here on behalf of the Forest Hunter Guild. He explained that his visit was purely personal. Still puzzled, the chairman asked what personal connection Aise had with the boy. Aise explained that Eric was not part of his party, but things had been different with him. Despite not being teammates, there was still a connection between them. He recalled how their party leader had seen the two of them together once, and shortly afterward, Eric had stepped up and saved him during a difficult moment. Still confused, the chairman asked why that would cause any issue between them, especially if they were from different parties. Seeking clarity, he pressed for more details. Aise, now visibly flustered, hesitated and then shyly admitted that during that time, he wasn't wearing any clothes. The chairman's mind immediately jumped to strange conclusions. Eric, noticing the expression on the chairman's face, realized he was thinking something completely inappropriate. He rushed to clarify that nothing of the sort had happened. However, the chairman refused to believe a word and accused Eric of being a terrible person. Panicked, Eric pleaded with the chairman to reconsider and listen, but it was too late. Meanwhile, Aise continued his story, explaining that after that incident, it became almost impossible for Eric to return to the city. Because of what had happened, Eric was no longer welcome in the Forest Hunter Guild. When Eric did eventually come back and met Aise again, he gave him 10,000 X, stating that their work together was done and he no longer needed him. After that, Eric disappeared, only to end up working here under the chairman. Still stuck on his misinterpretation of the story, the chairman became completely convinced that Eric had paid Aise for some unsavory reason. In the next moment, the chairman rose from his seat and in a fit of rage kicked Eric out of the building. Literally, he screamed at Eric to get lost and never come back. Furious, he warned Eric that if he ever returned, he'd first have to take responsibility for the woman. Outside, Aise joined Eric and commented that everything had gone smoothly. He informed Eric that the chairman had permitted it easily. Eric, clearly frustrated, yelled at Aise, asking why he had twisted the story so much. Aise defended himself, arguing that he had no choice. He couldn't risk telling the chairman about the church officer. Eric still insisted that he didn't want to go with Aise, claiming that he had quit being a hunter 6 months ago. Aise acknowledged this, but reassured him that their current mission was simple. They just needed to go to the Sot forest to collect some samples, and there was no danger involved. He promised Eric that if any monsters attacked them, he would protect him no matter what. Aise told him to be more honest with him, and despite Eric's reluctance, the words reached him. Eventually, Eric gave in and agreed to accompany him. In the Sot forest, the two had already embarked on their exploration expedition. Eric carried a large bag on his back, following Aise, who led the way. As they walked, Eric wondered if coming along had been the right decision. He couldn't help but question why Aise had chosen him for this mission, secretly fearing that Aise might know his true identity. Sensing his unease, Aise suggested taking a break, if the bag was too heavy. Eric dismissed the offer, noting that they'd only been walking for 10 minutes and could keep going. He remembered the old mayor's advice to blend in as an ordinary person and not let anyone suspect he was from another world. As they continued walking, Eric spotted a small level 2 monster named Kilok. Trying to act like a normal person, he approached the creature with childlike curiosity and commented on how adorable it looked. Suddenly, the monster bit his hand, causing Eric to sit down and start crying like a normal person might. In a panic, he pleaded with Aise to let them keep the small monster as a sample, but Aise immediately used his fire magic to kill it. Rushing over, Aise wiped the blood from Eric's hand and applied a healing potion to the bite wound. Clearly worried, he anxiously checked Eric for signs of poisoning and handed him a small bottle, instructing him to inform him directly if they found any more sample materials. He would handle them himself. As Aise's behavior continued to shift more and more, Eric kept walking forward. A small chicken monster landed on his head, and Aise immediately used fire magic to kill it. As they progressed through the forest, Aise kept killing all the small monsters they encountered, even burning parts of the forest in the process. Eric, shocked by this change in behavior, couldn't understand why Aise was setting the forest on fire just to eliminate these minor threats. Aise explained that there were many dangerous monsters hidden in the forest and asked if any had hurt Eric or if he had sustained any injuries. Eric said he was fine, but expressed concern over the damage being done to the forest. Aise assured him that if he withdrew his magic properly, the fire would extinguish and the forest wouldn't be harmed. Eric still insisted that he stop using fire magic, and Aise agreed to try. In the next scene, Eric was chopping wood while Aise began sharing more about himself. He revealed that Raud's party was the first party he had ever joined. Eric was surprised to hear this. Aise continued, saying that he didn't have much experience with parties and that this was the first time he had gone into the forest alone with someone for camping. Eric asked him why he had joined the Hunter Guild and why he chose to become a hunter. Aise replied that he thought entering the forest would allow him to collect many samples for his research, which was why he joined. He explained that even when doing research at home, they gained experience and leveled up. Eric laughed and jokingly asked what kind of dragon hunter family would stay home and just think about catching a dragon. Aise clarified that his family had nothing to do with it and added that dragons were rare now, almost extinct. Eric was shocked and asked if there really were no dragons left. Aise responded by noting that Eric seemed very interested in dragons. Eric, thinking to himself, considered telling Aise that if he found a high-level dragon, it could help him level up. He told Aise that he hadn't seen any dragons where he lived and wanted to see one since they were such rare monsters. Aise warned that dragons weren't cute animals. They were powerful monsters with limitless magical ability. They might possess special powers like fire and could even burn the earth. However, dragons were also intelligent and capable of speech, which is why they could communicate with people. He believed that the remaining dragons were hiding to protect themselves and that they always lived alone to keep their identities secret. Eric agreed, saying that staying alone was the best way to stay safe. He even mentioned knowing a wyvern, a monster who was kind, could speak, and always stayed alone for protection. Aise laughed and called it a goofy joke, saying he had never seen a wyvern talk, only dragons could do that. But Eric insisted it was true. Aise remained skeptical and laughed even harder. After a while, Aise asked Eric if he was planning to become a hunter again. Eric replied that he didn't want to return to Buckman's party because he might cause them trouble. Aise clarified that he wasn't asking him to return there, he was inviting him to join his own new party. Eric asked what would happen if he ran away again. Aise admitted he didn't know why Eric left Buckman's party, but said he could see it in Eric's face. He had been in serious trouble and had likely left to protect them. He assured Eric that his secrets were safe. Frustrated, Eric snapped, breaking the wood in his hands, and pointed out that he had seen Aise cast magic without any incantations. Aise calmly responded that everyone had secrets, and they could keep theirs hidden. Still uneasy, Eric asked what guarantee he had that Aise wouldn't betray him. Aise dismissed the concern and said it didn't matter, even if he did, because darkness surrounded them both. Eric gripped his sword tightly. Aise, wearing a menacing expression, held out a flaming magic wand in front of him and apologized to Eric. Eric stared at Aise intensely, ordering him to lower his wand immediately. Instead, the magician unleashed a fiery attack, its force so strong that even Eric staggered back. Frowning, Aise concluded that this place was far more dangerous than he had anticipated. Eric watched the fiery orb sail past him, fear flashing across his face as it flew directly into the mouth of a predatory creature, knocking it backwards. The creature collapsed onto its back, gasping. Aise explained dryly that he had shot a cloth of mana to burn the monster's lungs, preventing it from calling for help. Eric was amazed at how quickly Aise assessed the situation. He had assumed the man to be a fragile scholar, more suited to research than combat. Aise responded briefly, suggesting that Eric might consider joining his team. While Aise stood watch, Eric began ripping open the monsters. Nellie was surprised that even the wealthy cared about demonic stones. Twirling a long lock of hair around his fingers, Aise remarked that an unusual number of monsters were roaming around lately, despite typically avoiding human contact. That explained the current shortage of extermination quests in the guild. Eric began to understand why the magician had burned them all without hesitation. When he suddenly noticed something odd, looking closely at the corpse of one animal, he realized it had come from a dungeon. Aise angrily shouted at Eric, urging him to retrieve the demonic stone. That's it for today, guys. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to like, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe for more epic manhwa recaps. See you in the next part. Signing off.